You know, one day those crickets will stop. Not because they were active, because they can't cricket no more. And this is our dilemma. It's the choice. The action of inaction over the action of action. Coming to a time in the future when you don't have the ability to act. And that makes your choice, even after it's too late. And you would do better if you knew better, or if you wouldn't make all the list of things that need to be done before you get active in what needs to happen. We're seeing the evidence in the world today against us, and to advance these things that we see are written. This is not even an idea, notion, a theory. It's exactly what they plan to do for us. They'll tell you it's for you. And I just sit back and wonder, where is everybody's head at? That we don't really move up against this. Even if we start stumbling, it'd be better to be doing stumbling than nothing at all. That one day the choice is going to be made for you, and the crickets will cease because there will be no way to respond. The crickets is the anticipation that the crickets will stop and respond. The silence for the crickets at this point would be the action of people stepping up and not consenting, finally having a line drawn so much for themselves that it's crossed, they won't draw another line, and they'll make a decision to start acting wherever and however, that they aren't going to take it anymore. Enough's enough. You know, one day that silence is not going to be because people stood up and acted. It's going to be because all the crickets are dead. The opportunity is past, and you're living the life you agreed to and consented to when you didn't have an objection, or made an excuse for the objection. So as a possible bombshell information coming off this week is all the other things. We're going to get into a little bit of what I said last week, and really kind of been not amazed so much as just interested to see, with only a few hours of study, I think I've pretty much nailed this whole week worth of news. And you can too, and this is what the point I'm trying to say. It's coming here. The control thing, the methodology is here actually. We don't have to make it up anymore. We don't have to get so involved and so complicated. But genetic engineered salmon approved for consumption. Genetic engineered salmon approved for consumption. Federal regulators on Thursday, this is feed, folks. They're giving you feed. The animals that you they're feeding you. This is not food. This is feed. In one regard, I think that the technology is pretty fascinating, pretty neat. On the other regard, when you're going to put it in your body and have you are what you eat kind of thing going on, and I haven't found yet geneticists that even on Twitter you talk to them, we got to tell people the science, and you ask them a question and all of a sudden you get ignored. And my simple question right now, I haven't got past the point, what about the unintended proteins that are created? What about the problem with the cell making unintended proteins to protect itself from the invasion that you've done to the cell? And those unintended proteins are not so good for us. They cause basic alterations in how other cells get made and what will make and how they will respond in the future. So I'm not absolutely against all genetically modified organisms, dependent on how they're really used, correct? I mean, if they're just a process to a thing that is an inert process to a process that makes an inert type of action for us, an ingredient that we won't consume or won't go in our air or won't get in our, won't assimilate, but it's a chemical that we need, that we find out that bacteria, fungus, and all these things can make a lot more efficient, maybe not so bad. But when you start going into making it so that it gets into your food systems and touches your skin and be able to intrude, and it brings with it things that they want to just hold their nose to and don't really want to look at, for lots of reasons. I won't get into it. You know it all. Behind the Woodshed, if you listen to me at all and you're in the mind to be listening, do I have to go on with it anymore about all these things, that why we exist this way, why these people do what they do? Bottom line is the bottom line, correct? Federal regulators on Thursday approved genetically engineered salmon as fit for consumption. If you're just an animal, how high do they have to raise the bar, folks? Making it the first genetically altered animal to be cleared for American supermarkets and dinner tables. The approved The approval by the Food and Drug Administration caps a long struggle by AquaBounty Technologies. There's a small company that first approached the FDA about approval in the 1990s. We've heard about this story for a long time. I've reported on it a couple times over the broadcast time. This company's been pushing hard, and at some point I have no real problem with technology. It's just how is it being applied? And this one is, again, if we see the plan, you see, well, this is feed. This is not food. And when I was going to get into aquaculture myself a while back, and there's some really basic problems with doing that. It's not that it can't be done; it's that it normally, as any mechanized system, it can't be done in the densities it's done unless you want to go to the chemicals, chemistry, the antibiotics, all that kind of thing. And when they do this in the water, it's so dense that most companies won't pay for the type of systems that it needs to keep the water relatively clean. It's no different than having a pig farm, concentrated pig farm next to an aquifer or some runoff, and that's when you have the problems there. The nitrite runoff and all that kind of stuff. Notwithstanding that it's a natural product, the runoff, it's still too much for the system, the earth system, to take care of. Aquaculture is pretty much the same way. Aquaculture is no different than any high-intensity manufacturing for your food system. That where fish may be good to eat, in this case, I'm not so sure. I'm not even talking about the genetics here. I'm just talking about the process of making food animals for food in a concentrated way. It's really a trouble. It's really a lot of work. This fish is going to have some restrictions on how it's made, and a lot of it's stated that the main complaint apparently was it going to breed in the wild. They say these things are impossible to replicate themselves, but nature has a way, folks. Nature has always been shown to have a way. And so they're going to make special facilities, these are contained facilities. It's like aquaponics, aquaculture in tanks. That's going to create a whole other set of things. So there's beyond this agreement that we're going to make supermarket available genetically modified salmon comes the processing side problems that I had to look at myself when I was going to think about doing this a long time ago. That it's not these things that we do to survive here in the world to make ourselves enough food in these ways is not quite so simple and so straightforward. That it's completely missed. The main problem with this to me as well is that there's not going to be any requirement to put any labeling or not document the fish being the Atlantic salmon, is what they call the Atlantic salmon, or whatever name they end up calling it. They may have a voluntary guideline that the FDA is going to be making, and so here's the bottom line for here. They know that most people, if they know it, aren't going to be buying unless they can almost give the stuff away, and even then people may not. They're not going to probably buy it at the supermarket. This fish is going to be made for processing. And they don't have to label that this fish is in the processing. And it grows like 3 to 4 times larger, given the same environment, than normal salmon. And so this is a mass crop that they're not going to have to label it. And so when you get processed food, and if they can sell this thing cheap enough, and in quantity, and right now that's the only saving grace. This is just small. They said it's a small company, but as it comes on, as it starting getting contracts, it'll start upping its ability to produce. And you're gonna, you won't know this, but you're gonna find this fish as a bulk of fish additive to other foods, probably for your pet food to start with, probably for your meals that are fed to animals for protein. So this is now we have a food that's genetically modified as a meat. So again, they're feeding you well, but the food you're going to get is probably non-existent. No food, a lot of feed. To me, this was in a way a bombshell determination. Though it was predictable, it's about the bottom line. It's about the way that they set this up. The precautionary principle doesn't work for your consumables. It only works when they have an agenda to confine your activities and adjust your behavior. And this then falls on over into your pharmaceuticals. That this fish to me was a pretty big deal coming through. again, not unknown that it would happen. That it happened is pretty impressive. That it took so long to happen, and then it did happen, was kind of interesting. But here it is. Now you're going to start seeing, they'll start to figure out how to get these things through. And when you talk about turkey bacon, that's going to be an interesting pig to see. Pigs fly flu may be around here soon. When pigs fly, it'll be turkey bacon they get from that, and possibly your vaccines. It's really around the corner. So here it is. Your food's going to have salmon that's been GM modified, and we really don't know what the heck this stuff does to you. And they don't really care, because you're only part of the bottom line is if you get sick from it, they make more money treating you for how sick you are. And they'll give you what you have, any number of names, and they'll give you a bunch of pharmaceuticals in order to not cure it, but just to continue it. So welcome to the future in the chimera feed system, apparently. If I remember right, this has the genes of an eel in it as well. So it doesn't really matter. The FDA has said this is not going to hurt you. It's fit for consumption. Didn't say fit as food. Another bombshell thing going off here in the last, touching for last week's issues. Now the dominoes start to fall, folks, as I told you. It's pretty predictable. Exactly what, I don't know. It's really not what, but that things happen. But state of emergency, blackout in Russia's Crimea after transmission towers in Ukraine blow up. Hitting the little peninsula of Crimea that Russia took over in the Ukraine. And then what's interesting is Putin is blamed for it immediately. Why would that be? But that's what we hear. And this is the thing locally. You have to start being able to, I don't know what the answer is going to be on how you tell other people that are completely not getting this. Maybe just letters to the editor to start. Maybe get into places where you can, with proof, identify some of the problems. Again, I'm not so much a Putin supporter because I think the whole thing's a setup. These players are really good at what they do. And we're seeing that here in this last week and what happened over the last week. As I suggested to you, I don't necessarily consider this a false flag. I think this is a combination action. I think a foreign state took advantage of France on top of what they knew was happening as a drill or what some kind of a operation, and they taught France a little bit of a lesson here. And there's one story that hangs out I told you about. There was no news on it. I had independent sources early on that were independent of the news feed lines that said something happened, and that finally came out as another independent observation that hasn't been talked too much about, while they focus our attention on Syria and the passports and the dead body next to the passports and encryption and all this other stuff. All of a sudden now, Crimea is now without power. They're getting emergency situations up as the dominoes start to show this is a widening war, and Russia is instrumental in being the target to it as well. I don't know about World War yet, as far as I think it's already been in it. I mean, it's going to take a while for people to want to admit into that, but I think we're there. And the thing that I was talking about that was holding out, I've been waiting and watching, and honestly, I can't find much video or many pictures that show anybody dead. I can't find it. But I also can't find any video or pictures of this story here that I told you about. It was not a Muslim terrorist that attacked, but the report was, remember from the Dutch guy talking to the Asian reporter that was from France in that neighborhood, to another guy who does online journalism and does research and he tracks people down and does interviews with them. He said that there was a white guy that showed up, a professional white guy that did a hit on one of the cafes. And Paris attacks, witness at bar massacre, says gunmen were white, clean-shaven, muscular like soldiers, and gunmen came and left in a black Mercedes. Independent research from somebody else on this very same report that I did just on a few hours of study, looking around to try and set up what was this. It's easy to say it's a hoax. It's easy to say it's a flash flag. We can just go ahead and call all that stuff out. We could say it was legitimate. But I'm more interested in finding out the dynamic of what we're up against. And I really do believe the elements of this, what it does to people, how people respond, are what we have to study. Not necessarily how they pulled this off, because we will never know the insides of how they pulled this off. We just know what we're told. But that these techniques are being used against everybody else as well. And you see the dominoes. How resistant have people been to this storyline? Buying it hook, line, and sinker, and not questioning things like, well, what about the white guys in the Mercedes? What about that? And then you find out that all the attackers that they tried to have Syrian passport, that they tried to blame for being foreigners coming in, everybody that did the attack that they're telling us about, that they're catching up with, was all French nationals. The Syrian passport found near the remains of the suicide bomber, the Stade de France intrigues French investigators for many reasons. The single most intriguing fact is that the passport was there at all, one French official said. It was not actually on the terrorist body, and what remained of it, it was lying nearby, and as if it was meant to be found. It's almost exactly what I said, folks. This is not no proof. What's the chain of title here? If you go evidentiary, there's no chain of title for these documents. We see the evidence of these impeccably placed documents everywhere. There's pieces of paper that are indestructible. And so I was feeling fairly good about the ability to take this situation on the scantest amount of information and essentially watch it unfold in the reports of things, of what they want to tell us. And I just wanted to point that out as far as the accuracy, because that is how you start training yourself to be able to look into things that are not so obvious. These are really open books for us, if we will, to learn this. That I use these as our tools to train us. I use them as the evidence that we need to move along, to get us to the point where we are turning around and deciding the line has been crossed that we can't allow to be crossed. And we're not into writing another line. We're going to go ahead and we're going to start the pushback. Whatever it is we can do. And I told you last week, we don't have to get too complicated on what that is. Just start engaging. As soon as you engage, I haven't yet seen anybody who has the passion, the direction, the finding of the wrong that needs to be right, that they move on, that hasn't had somebody. It may take a little bit while you orient yourself and get yourself in the right place, but that you start to find places to do what you need to do and how to do it. And if you listen very carefully, people that you're working either against to expose or with will help you, guide you on what it is. You listen very carefully. Someone with something to hide will exactly tell you what they're trying to hide, and then you have to go do the research on, if you can do it in your mind in the immediate moment. You think about, okay, what are they avoiding here? It's an evasion. What are they evading here that I haven't quite got it locked out? And when you find out what that is, when you start listening to the core of what, it may not be what they're saying, it may be it may be something that they're trying to keep off the record, some kind of little fact that they know is an element of the evidence of their culpability. You're listening for all this stuff while you're talking to somebody, and these things come to you. It won't do that if you're not engaging. It just won't. So this passport, I told you this passport was going to be really important, and it was going to be a showing that there's a falsity here. Well, they did, at least we're told, I guess they have to tell us now, right? As I said, the part of France was attacked. They're as much in the dark as anybody else, beyond what they may have planned. That the timing of which may have been taken advantage of with people like those people that had the money to buy a Mercedes and wear all black and come clean shaven to a cafe to shoot it up. I assume that the report was that people died there. That has not been refuted, notwithstanding we don't have the pictures. Remember, lots of places got hit, all but one of which could have been the place where people died. And I don't know that the French government wants to show that it had a vulnerability. But here we have it. The French passport became important, what I was telling you about. I didn't get so much into it, but the communications we talked a little bit about. The demonization of encryption. Police find Paris attacks coordinated via unencrypted CMS. This is another bugaboo that they want to throw on us to trying to get us focused on, that we need to stop encrypting. The government needs to have access. Because it's the future surveillance state is here, and they need more, I guess. They already know how to do a lot of this stuff. They want you to believe it. And so this came up. As I said, all these points came and cleared themselves out this week, which I'm just kind of cutting through. This encryption thing was so much that New York Times quietly pulled an article blaming encryption the Paris attacks when it found that it wasn't. So these were reports that weren't actually based in any knowledge. That they talked to us is proof. That if you're looking very carefully at these stories, you can, as I did last week, on just the scantest amount of reports I could find as quickly as I could find them, I was able to almost predict this week's news. If I was to set it up and say, oh, okay, we're going to write a story this and we're going to write a story like that, this is what we're going to find. These stories came out to do this, that the New York Times made a report that said that encryption was the bugaboo, and then they had to pull that story. Doesn't tell anybody, just pulls it out. Now, I've got all these links. Blogcaster will have. You want to see the proof of all this. So, if you have any questions, I just make this stuff up. Well, I do. I mean, as I talk, I look at the tabs, I start talking. That's as much as I start. That's as much as I prepare after I see the concept. Sometimes a lot goes on in the week, and I forget my connection, so it takes a little while to get up what I want to talk about that. But this part was just showing us that everything was really laid out before in the news if you just looked really carefully. That we have to start, I think, partly explain to people how that this lie, this deception is, and how you can figure it out, and almost like a magic trick, teach everyone to be a magician at predicting the future in a way. Question came up: attack in France, state-sponsored, but which state? Isn't that what I said? I mean, I proposed that this looked like a state attacked another state. This wasn't an inside job, so to speak, even though there may have been militants inside that were planning. And, they knew where they were. You see how fast they started to go after people. France didn't know what they were up against once they got actually hit. And so they wanted to make a story. They supposedly took out some people afterwards. They ran down the guy that I thought was going to be their next Osama poster child. They ran him down, and they say they killed him. Or he's dead. I don't know, they killed him, but he blew himself up, but he's dead, supposedly. Creating another boogeyman on the run. This is pretty interesting how this works over and over. They're doing this in the States. I guess that's what I want to say. Look at this and then translate it over. It's happening in the States. It's just happening with different characters on the stage. It's like, what's state-sponsored terror? It's a war of terror on the world, folks. That includes you. Anybody listening to my voice? That includes you. It's the war of terror against you. And which state? Well, any state that wants you to be in terror and be terrorized. And it seems to be about all these governments that are running Zio West propaganda, Zio West protocols and plans, and then the universal UN diktat. I want you to remember something too for the United States, that they can make a treaty, but there's been plenty of cases that they can't do things that the treaty would not allow. They can't just override the Constitution and the mandates of the Constitution. And even though that may be as much a fiction as everything else, if that's a fiction, so is their diktat, their foreign diktat. Remember that. Don't ever give up on a position. Don't let anybody talk you out of your right of self-determination by whatever authority. And this is why I keep trying to say, listen, you really got to look out in the world and see what's happening to us, how they're doing it. I was just talking in the mining district meeting. I was able to identify, again, paying attention. And again, I wouldn't be able to do this unless I was engaged. You can't do it from the computer. You can't do it with things you're going to find on the internet. You can do it through a bunch of things on the internet applied. And this is what the point was. Once someone else was doing some work, and I looked, and they wanted my opinion, my observations, really, in helping trying to move their position along. And what they were doing was great for the lesson side, but the strategy and tactic side wasn't quite fulfilling what he needed for what he was doing. And I was looking in, saying, "Wow, you don't know what you've just uncovered here." That I was able to take what he had uncovered that he didn't know, and we were able to expand that out to see how the states' governments are being taken down by their own actions from inside in a totally different way than I had thought before, although I had identified part of it myself. But by doing this, you can then take the methods that they use and actually starting applying the black and white, as I say, the law that requires you hold them to the requirements, notwithstanding you may believe they're fictions. Like I believe that these states are fictions, not just because they're body politics, corporations body politics that way, because those are corporations. It's a singular entity representing an aggregate of interests. That's all a corporation actually is. A body politic is a political body. So that's not my problem. My problem is when inside that body politic, there are usurpers using that system to take and put their agenda on the rest of the body politic, and no one sees it. The method by which they do that is what I've been analyzing for quite a long time now. And I'm getting a very good understanding of it, but I don't know it all, so I'm still looking for how they're doing it. And so this method becomes very important. The question, state-sponsored terror, but which state? Don't worry about the state, just put that as a legal entity, put that as a group of people, put that as an agenda, make that state some condition coming upon you. You're looking for the method by which that particular condition is brought into your system to undermine you and the system that was, at least for us in America and property, was to protect us. So I said that this was a state against state hit, maybe over the top of this, what France was thinking they were doing, and we heard the drills were there and all, just like every other Sandy hoax and all these other things. That the question did come out, which state hits France? And I thought that was interesting that even came up as a possibility for someone else. Again, because for me, I told you something last week that I only had very few hours of looking around to come up with what I did. It was kind of I'm just testing myself in a way as well. But I have enough, if I can say, confidence in an analysis, the methodology, not that I'm going to be 100% right, but that the method works in certain ways, that you can then start looking in certain places immediately to find certain answers, and they ought to show up. And if they do, it's a confirmation of your own work, your own research is right on, isn't it? If I can predict that you're going to move left every time you move left, that's pretty powerful. That, again, saying that, that Syria was going to be, they wanted to focus on Syria because the bigger plan is to try and put pressure on Assad as an underlying thing of a state attack to state. It did come out that all Paris attackers identified so far were European nationals. European nationals. It just didn't come from France. So I was in error to the extent that it would have been internal for what the game was, but in fact they did spread it out around Europe. Now that then harkened out, okay, if they did that, then this is a bigger play, right? And then I did touch on that. This is for the whole of Europe to be addressed. Initially it's for France to lock down that country. Let me go through. All attackers on Friday's massacre in France so far have been identified as European Union nationals, according to top EU officials. The announcement further casts doubt on the validity of the Syrian passport found near the bodies of the slain attackers. There's again, that passport was all corroded. This was like the holy grail for, if it was believed, for these people that did the attack. And it's kind of turned out to be the sore thumb, as they seem to be now. But in fact, they wanted to take people's imaginations into La La Land and keep them off the fact that it was people in Europe themselves that got the people in Europe, and not necessarily refugees. These are implants. These people are already there. Consider that like you see the FBI helping people in the United States to go bomb someplace, and they hand them a bag of air and say that's a bomb, and if you smack it with one hand against the other, it makes a boom. And that's going to be a bomb. You do that in a big mall, and then the guy goes and does that thinking it's a bomb, and he gets arrested for a terrorist act. So that's the fake stuff. But inside the United States, there's all kinds of stuff going on. Mostly by the government, you see. That this is a European problem now. In the EU, I found that very interesting that they called the European nationals. What happened to the EU here? So this is telegraphing the EU is under attack, but I don't necessarily think it's under attack. I think it's been part of the plan. It's that multidimensional chessboard. Remember, when the European Union came on board, it removed all the borders by that veneer of authority. Now what you're watching is disaster striking the people, and they're going to be putting back checks back into. It makes it look like European Union can't survive. because now they have all these so-called border checks. What these just are, these are just travel blockades within what will be continuing as the European Union, but now with all the checks and surveillance over what people thought was a free movement plan actually is the locking down of the future surveillance world. And so you see this playing out as well here. And if some of that problem starts to creep up when you look at the France side problem and what they ended up wanting, and I told you that the movers and shakers on the global scale wanted France in the war. They wanted that aircraft carrier. They wanted that thing to be in play. They wanted France to stop being so well underneath Russia's agreements, and they wanted France in. They also wanted an excuse to put France in. And then France called that out. They said, we're on a war on terror now. They declared war, and they declared it under the United Nations sanctions to be able to go into Syria, of all places, to stop not Assad, they claim, but this thing called Daesh, which is which is what? United is us, ISUS, is Israel and the United States allies creating these and funding these organizations to work to destabilize Syria enough to take out Assad. And so I suggested that there's a problem here with France coming in. Russia must have an agreement behind the scenes at some point, and I'd be very interested to see whether or not if France attacks anything of Assad's at this point, or allows an argument that would allow that. And now that that's happened, the United States and Britain and some other people have gone to the UN, and now they're getting the ability to come in as a coalition. And this is the coalition that Russia was asking for, essentially on its terms, that now the United Nations has given the right to France to lead the plan. They didn't use the Russian plan. They used the French plan. Even though it's in the record that Paris attacks mastermind named French PM knew operations were being prepared from Syria, even though we now know that that's not the truth. And this is how the UN rolls, and this is what I'm telling you about all the players through the UN. This is a really big, well-played game set up against all the people. They knew there was going to be an attack, none of the facts of which show that it came from Syria, that their pushing did come from Syria. And everybody was crickets. Everybody's been crickets. Is exactly what they wanted to see. Without your voiced non-consent, they just keep moving. If you're going to be crickets at any time, they'll move on that. And they're holding you to have to make the statement, and they're redrawing the line for you. What is too much? When is enough, and they redraw that line. Why do we continue to hear this silence in the people when there's demonstrable lies going on? The UN is moving, even though they know this had nothing to do with Syria directly, that the passport was fake, that all the European nationals were involved, not anybody from Syria. There was that Greece thing coming back up. It makes no sense to me. It still makes no sense. They come in, oh no, we did it right. Well, it doesn't matter. They're now showing that it's people from inside that are doing this. Well, what's inside, folks? The inside people are the ones paid by the United States and Israel and Britain and France itself. Remember, France has been attacking Iraq all this time with its air force. This is not really a big move for France. And all that has been helping the United States to expand is. The attacks were known to come from Syria, even though the evidence shows otherwise. The PM says he knew that, so the PM's either lying or he's been misinformed. Either way, as a people, you got to stop the train. Hold it. Oh, wait a minute. Now we found out the train goes so fast the brand new train goes over brand new tracks, and the government's willing to run it off the track. They're so incompetent, they're willing to, at the same day, folks. This is was just a symbol of what was going on. They're running this whole thing off the tracks. The government is running it off the tracks, and the people, they want to see if the people will let them, and the people are. Notwithstanding also that there was apparently, and I haven't been able to track this down, it was a Paris attack was reported on Wikipedia and Twitter before it happened. And there's a lot of pictures about the post that said that this was going to happen. Breaking death toll from Paris terror attacks rises to at least 120, with 270 others injured, with a date of 11/11/2015 at 10:44. How is that even possible? Now, I guess we can go on timing and all that stuff. The point is that there's enough evidence to cause, in a questionable population, in a critically thinking population, that these little facts here and there, before you go beating up on another country, you want to make sure, first of all, you're beating up on the right people, and you're not going to be putting your people in harm's way, or you're not going to be violating someone when you go there to do that. That none of these questions are asked by the people themselves is really, again, the mirror that we see in the United States. People in the United States are not going to do much different. And we got proof of that as well. All in a week, folks. This is how fast these dominoes fell. These dominoes fell about as fast as dominoes fall. Pretty impressive to watch what cricketdom has become, the shadow of cricketdom across the world. Within days, as I was telling you, the people are screwed. That's SCROOD, screwed. No matter who done it to France. Whether France done it to themselves as a false flag, whether part of it was a hoax, whether someone took advantage, a foreign state took advantage of France to tell them that they were to bring them in line behind the scenes. I suggested to you that they want more controls, they want more constraints. Immediately they put the lockdown on the state of France to supposedly secure everybody. Now France has a powerful and controversial new surveillance law. All within a week, folks. It wasn't enough after Charlie Hebdo would happen. Now they're going to do this more. Remember, this is a reflection of what starts to come down, or probably has already been coming down in the United States. I know it doesn't seem like it. We're so far removed, but this is actually already being done and done. Again, NDAA was pretty much it for me. It did all this. They just need to put it down in places a little more solidly, getting local governments to start applying it. And then what do we see? We saw the admission for the DOJ bringing in the Strong Cities Network. If you don't think that this lockdown's already happening in here, they're doing it right in front, transparently to you. You don't see it. They're doing it. The very same thing. The thing you see going on in France and the EU to take the states, and remember this part, just look in the future here, to take the borders they dropped in the European Union, that they're now putting back as surveillance checkpoints, is no different than what they can do in the United States, where everyone thinks they live in a state that's sovereign and independent, but have to be full faith and credit between the states. You watch how those borders get locked down the same way. You're supposed to have freedom of travel. You watch how this thing works out as they keep bringing up these false and faux or utilizing the opportunity of a foreign state attack upon your land to start taking away every last bit of your ability to think that you had anything to say. Within a week, France already got the law. And no one said anything, even despite all these anomalies. I pointed out on a scant amount of studying about the situation, and then the prediction that this could happen. France deploys 10,000 troops to patrol street, says freedoms must be given up to fight terrorism. Welcome to the New World Order, folks. This is right in your face. They're telling you right here. I mean, my mind goes just streaming right now. I can't even say it all. Of all the things I've talked about over the years, of all the little points, different prime ministers and presidents, what they've all said to tell you this is right around the corner. Just the one name, Stephen Harper, when he talked, I think in 2009, at a G20 or something discussion. We're going to have to give up a little bit of sovereignty for this, but it's worth it. And I heard crickets then. I was shocked, but who cares? It's in Canada. The Canuckistans can take care of it, right? Well, obviously not. Because now this has all just been oozing out all over the world, and no one checks it. Not even the bright white knights in the United States of America. Those that were told they better be vigilant are not. As the dust settles in the wake of the Paris terror attacks, the world continues to watch the reaction of the French government. Over the weekend, President Francois Hollande launched military strikes in coordination with the United States forces. Additional measures announced. Do you ever hear about the United States forces at the time France was striking? No, but this is the meme that they're bringing up. This is now taking advantage of the fact and trying to counter what Russia has done to show off and show up every other nation by going in there and starting to take matters in their own hands and allowing, as I said, that would probably have to go, allowing the ground troops of Assad to start mopping back up and cleaning these people out. Big black eye on everybody else who's been doing it for on and on. France itself, remember, France has been there. Additional measures announced include the deployment of 10,000 troops around the country. That was not down into Syria, folks. They're saying they're in a war of terror, a war on terror, and yet they put 10,000 troops in their own country. Why? Because they know they have people inside Europe that are actually the threat. And they want to lock you all down. Because it has nothing to do with Syria. Everybody understands internationally what's happening in Syria is a big war crime. But if they can get concurrence, they can get consensus, they get concurrence with everybody, then it'll be okay. And that's how this whole method goes. And how they do that is how they get away with it is because no one stands up and says, hey, I'm not going to stand for that anymore. That was wrong. That's just wrong. Find the principle, folks. Get the principle behind the woodshed. You're going to get a principle, right? Hopefully that'll last you the rest of your life. And then strike out the rest of the world with your life with that principle in your pocket and use it as often as possible. Find one. Go use it. Because it's on the dominoes are falling all in the same week. United Nations resolution plan to weaken is ill now, they say. They don't want to say is intelligence service of Israel, is us intelligence Israel service in the United States. They want to do is ill every time when they want to hide who these people are, and they have to hide who the people are. They're supporting this and promoting it. The United States and the Zio West Corps, they have to use is ill, and it is ill. United Nations Security Council is preparing to blacklist those recruiting fighters for is ill and Al-Qaeda linked groups in Iraq and Syria. They want to make you think that is ill and Al-Qaeda are really different. They're not. It's just the news is replete with the proofs. And I find it now commentators that have more listenership and notoriety, more celebrity, now are just now coming to the fact of what we've been talking about for months and months. And so now they're, lots of credit going to the celebrity, as people are finally starting to see what's been talked about, at least behind Woodshed for a long time, to set this thing up. What allowed me to look at a very few hours to find out what I think has proven itself out. The United Nations is considering a resolution to weaken Israel. Well, it's not just considering, because right after this story, this is what the news and the countries started talking about, and France actually picked up as their torch. Under the resolution, the UN Security Council can consider, quote, and listen, this is a very important word in here, quote, all necessary means, close quote, to deal with Israel. Diplomats in New York told the Andulo agency. All necessary means. When you're working out of necessity, folks, there's no limit. All necessary means. I suspect this was a closeted declaration of war, utilizing the war on terror as in place of what they're doing is the war of terror. All necessary means. And they use this phrase immediately to do more bombings. And they are confining it to supposed Daesh, at least France is, and immediately Russia brought out their big bombers. Almost everything state of the art right now is in the air right now that we know of from Russia. As I told you, they would probably have to do, as there's now more countries now getting in on the dogfight over there to protect itself, Russia and Assad, over this purported attack that they're going to go against is ill. And the lunacy behind these United States mercenaries in Syria are the ones that they're fighting, that the United States is saying that they're going to destroy those. I don't think so. That France, the allies, didn't destroy those, maybe only in the short term. Why? Because the plan is to take out Assad, even though their people have voted him democratically into office. That this all necessary means to me was the declaration of world war, as we're not going to hear that. Governments don't want their people to understand this is what we've been in. But underneath this excuse, war has declared a UN sanction to go into Syria to stop ISIS, or Daesh as they call it. And from that, the domino falls that the United Nations is agreeing to all necessary means. And this wasn't even a signed document before. All the Zio West picked up this phrase, all necessary means, and started increased activities. They tell us it's against ISIS. I haven't heard any stories that it isn't yet, but we know the United States must have been bombing the desert for over a year to have Russia come in and within a month start cleaning stuff up, and have the United States do it for a year and have actually ISIS expand. It has to be a whole lot more than an inconvenient truth. That the bigger plan was not just to get focused on Russia and Assad now, and bring this thing more, give the Zio West more legitimacy in Syria. And somewhat shockingly to me a bit, I don't know if it's shocking, but because of the chess game that goes on, when the aircraft carrier got moved, Putin said to his military in a very rare insight into one of their meetings for their armed forces. It's very interesting to listen to. Everyone giving a report. Putin said to his naval commander out in the Mediterranean, when that aircraft carrier shows up, communicate with them and work with them as allies. And then he said a very important point. We will be sending, direction to you, closed channel. That Putin kind of hands over the direction of the war to the French, which I found was very interesting. Because they're claiming now a right to attack ISIS from the UN Charter, and Russia is defending Assad on that government's request to be protected. And Putin made acknowledgement of the UN right, international law right of France to come and defend itself, given the situation. Which, if you look at it, this is very interesting positioning going on. There's a game going on deeper and wider than most would even report on. And maybe even more than I can even look at, that I just look at and I see these little things playing out. That I still at that point can't tell you that France and Russia don't have a deal behind the scenes. But I also realize, I told you, I'm not so sure that Russia's feeling too threatened that their technology can't take out an aircraft carrier pretty quick. That I think is the silent pressure, your capacity in the fight. And I think that's what the notice to the West was when Russia brought out its big aircraft, its big bombers, its long-range stuff, its cruise missiles. They launched for the first time. Russia launched for the first time, I think, 2 cruise missiles from a submarine in the Mediterranean. They've actually now used the technology they have designed in a way that they've never used before. So these are really high-stake, not just saber rattlings. They actually targeted emplacements and took them out, whatever their plan was. And that was the first time that had ever been done. They'd actually used these weapons of war. So the gloves are off here on most all levels at this point. But the grander thing is, as we watch how states, apparent autonomous states, can be subsumed by greater threats, essentially perceived, if not actual, perceived at least. As I told you that they're going after Europe to lock it down more, and sure enough, again, how fast this happened. It was really astonishing how fast this actually worked this time. This didn't take a month. All this is happening within days, actually, because a lot of this happened days ago that I'm reporting on. That Belgium warns of Paris-style attack in Brussels in lockdown was exactly what it's more of the defining act of what is anticipated probably everywhere that gives these people any trouble. And what I found fascinating was how they described this. Just a paragraph here of how Belgium justified this lockdown. And I understand, if I got my information coming into the broadcast right, there's been a military stepped into a hotel and locked the whole thing down. It says, don't go out. You're not leaving here. to show you this is now, and they use the threat, this threat here that I'll read you about, which fascinated me. How people don't respond to it is really amazing to me. But this threat, the whole position that they're talking about in Belgium is based in this phrase. We have precise information that outlines the risk of an attack similar to the one that unfolded in Paris. It is a threat based on the theory that it would take place with arms and explosives, maybe even in several places at the same time. So we have precise information of a threat based on a theory that someone's going to use arms and explosives. That's the threat that they've just locked down Belgium, and in particular one hotel this morning. They have precise information of a threat based on a theory. It should have you laughing, rolling on the floor, but this is serious stuff. People agree to this. People didn't say, "What? You're a nut. Go away. We need someone who pays attention." How do you have precise information on something that's just a theory? And then speak to something that happens in every war, that people will be using arms and explosives. This was not much different than saying because people got up in the morning and brushed their teeth, that we're threatened. We have precise information on the theory that everyone will get up this morning and brush their teeth, and they're going to use their arms, and that explosive tastes in their toothpaste. So this is the whole of the national construction is based upon precise information of a theory. And people are buying it to show you how little it takes to get the society to be compliant to nonsense. That is exactly when they saw they could do that. You see today, this morning, they're locking down a whole hotel. And France then comes out and says they're going to lock down. It's now going to go down. This military lockdown is going to be up for up to 3 months. Apparently they have a limitation on their constitution. And now they're working for legislation to stop it. The dominoes are falling very quickly here for locking down the whole of a European Union that was supposed to be an open border country. Even though they had the Europe being the states. Those states are now locking themselves out again to re-put down this control grid underneath the veneer of the European Union control, which is really the New World Order condition, where, as we read, Agenda 2030 says that these migrations are part of the plan. This mixing of the races is part of the plan. The mixing of culture is part of the plan. To get rid of multiculturalism is the ridding of the world of culture. And that's just not going to happen. People will hold to theirs and they will cause trouble. And that trouble will be used to gain more power by the state, those with the guns eventually. For us in the United States, it's not so obvious, but over in Europe, it's pretty clear. I mean, really, I think about, if 10% of the people, given it was real, and I saw the picture of the stage where the band was playing, and that looked like a setup shot. Big body, blood, like someone drugged bodies of bleeding bodies across the stage. But the light was all wrong. I don't know if you've ever been in one of these stages, but there's not much light in those places. It looked like the whole wall was opened up when they were letting inside light to this thing. So that picture wasn't very telling. But if 10% of the people in that building had guns, I have a hard time believing that as many people would have died. I'm not making the case for guns in this regard. I'm saying that when people are defenseless, utterly defenseless, you can expect carnage, if they want to use that word. When people are in the mindset of not being defensible, when they themselves aren't defensible, all you have is the flight and fight response. And you most likely will have a flight response if you can get away. Other than that, you're toast if you can't. In fact, the government came out for all of y'all. Here's a public service announcement. When these things happen, run. The government said run. The French government came out and said if you get an attack, like a cafe gets attacked, run. Don't try to hide. Don't try to hide down below. Don't try to lay on the ground. Get up and run. as fast and as far as you can. When that's your only defense, I think God be with you. And this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to get this in the mindset that you're incapable. And they're doing it. As simple as coming on the precise information based off a theory. How do you even do that, folks? And that's passed as authority to have the military in Belgium lock everything down. And what did they lock down? They protected with military the system of the government's buildings and NATO. I looked at that, I said, wouldn't it have been simpler just to hand everybody in the building of NATO a gun? They're military anyway. Wouldn't that have been enough? That you have to bring military out to lock down the whole of the governmental and business sector only? Leaving the people to fend for themselves anyway? What nonsense is this that we accept? But there it is. We accept this nonsense. And from Belgium, the reports are coming back. It looks like a war zone. Army APCs, roadblocks deployed in Brussels after explosives, chemicals, weapons found. Well, as we found out in the United States, weapons could be as simple as a pocket knife, and the chemicals could be as easy to decide as weapons as chlorine bleach and vinegar. So I don't know what this is all about more than to say immediately people are saying this place looks like a war zone. Now, I don't agree with that because all they are is what you're looking at is a military state, not a war zone, but people don't even know the difference. See, they ramp up the style of what they're looking at. The buildings aren't bombed out. There's not smoldering heaps everywhere. No, they're just military people with guns and tanks in your street. That's a military takeover. And people are fine with that. And so it will be here in the United States eventually, whether or not they do it by the cops or whether or not one by one, like I've been telling you, they're probably going to do it, or whether they do it more overtly. This same methodology of getting you to believe that it's happening for the right reason and then you really don't have a say, that's what the whole goal is over this. And you're watching the whole of Europe being re-locked down. And these spinmeisters are at work 24/7, if you don't believe it. So I've been telling you, look at the East. Look at the East to see about it's being a mirror to the United States, and it's going to have some warpage. It's like a funhouse mirror. So you're going to have to look really hard to see some of this, but you'll see those little bits and pieces that you recognize as not too distorted, that translate from the mirror of the East, the Middle East, and then Europe into the United States. They will bring it here to the United States. And sure enough, the spinmeisters and the production studios are hot on it. A new Islamic State video threatens attack on the White House. Some of you all are going, carry on, right? But, it's not being used for that purpose anyway. The Islamic militants released a video on Thursday. Islamic militants is us, folks. It's the United States. It's the Zio West support system and, the support system. Zio West is the Islamic State, and they released a video on Thursday. These United States paid mercenaries released a video on Thursday threatening the White House with suicide bombings and car blasts, and vowing to conduct more attacks on France. The 6-minute video released by the Islamic State Islamic fighters in Iraq applauds last week's Paris attacks, according to the translation of the Arabic provided by the Maryland-based site intelligence group. Point is that for me is just that here's the news. It's coming to a White House near you, all in the same week, to reflect exactly what I've been telling you is the direct relation and how these people will work in order to gain your compliance, your non-action against this. And it is overwhelming to a bit. How if you're the only voice in the wilderness, it is pretty bad. But you have to be that voice. That voice is beyond just the voice of you being resistant. That's you. That's you. That's your character standing up. Who you are. And I'm a firm believer that we can stop the revolution. We get off the wheel, the revolution of the wheel, and we do it a lot more intelligently this time. We don't need to go to violence at all. We may have to protect ourselves, but that's not violence, remember. And I think over 10 years we've been a pretty good example of that for myself, for people I work with. Not one time have we ever threatened anybody. Well, we threaten them with accountability with the law. I mean, that's not us to do. It's more than to point it out at this point. We've tried to look at the principles of peace, if you will, not being pacifists, but looking at the principles of our interaction in the sense of peace, and that we ought to be intelligent enough to advance a peaceful position to maintain a peace. That it would be a very major failure for us to go to any kind of, at least at this point, any kind of real violence if we have to defend ourselves, or even in defense, going to more than, I think, the words that we need in our presence. We're that deep into the stinking abyss, it's going to take a little bit to crawl out. And that's not an attack on anybody, that's us doing the work. And despite the handicaps, the stinking abyss, crawling on the side, is not very pleasant. It's slippery. You're going to go down, you're going to slide sideways, you're going to gain some traction and go up. But you got to be doing that, otherwise the stinking abyss absorbs you. And what it's at the bottom will probably devour you. And then there won't be no crickets that way. That day, there's no crickets. And maybe that day, I'll have, whether or not I choose that day, maybe the crickets will stop, but then I probably would just stop broadcasting. Because there's just nothing to say. I mean, it's down to every man and woman for themselves, isn't it? And that's not going to be a very good thing. And it is anyway. I mean, all of us, ultimately, each one of us have to make that decision. We came in by ourselves, we're going out by ourselves. And that's the choice we have to make at those times. Maybe we didn't have the choice coming in, but we certainly have the choice going through and out. And that's what we have to look at ourselves at as we go through. And what choices were you making? What excuses did you make to allow the condition that you find when you're happy to leave it, because it's just such a horrendous place? That, as I said before, I think a lot of this has been set out before. The United States is already kind of done in. It's what caused me to go to crickets, when it was incumbent upon the people to not accept what was being done in their name, in their representation. We're still being crickets. I'm trying to lay out how simply it's done to people. It's not a judgment that the Belgian people allowed a precise information on a theory to be able to put them under military control. I don't understand it, but I understand it. I don't understand how you can listen to that and not have a question enough to have a word in your mouth about how that doesn't make any sense on the face of it. And yet you hear silence, you hear crickets. That we were the same thing about the NDAA. That is one of the major things that put us in the same condition as all those European nationals that are being blamed for what happened in France. I was astonished how quickly the supposed cell was found out in France. And we find out they know about the cells, just like they know about those cells everywhere. And yet nothing seems to happen. Oh, well, until there needs to have a pawn moved on the global game board. And so NDAA brought us into notice that we are those enemy combatants, that they will go extrajudicial on you, which means there's no law. That means that the branch of government that was just the law of the justice system, it's gone. It means you don't have a government. It means at least the people that are operating don't operate under government. And I heard nobody respond to any of this. I was reporting about it coming on, and yet this bill, this NDAA, keeps coming up, and it keeps being money appropriated to the NDAA to allow this same condition, and I still hear nothing. And this is in the face of having the Republican Party that lots of people thought was going to be the saving grace about all this. This is when they were in control. They haven't changed this, so they're in on it. This is not a question. I don't even know what to do, laugh or shake my head, about these so-called presidential debates, knowing that it takes a vote to get these people in, and all you're doing is agreeing to the servitude that an enfranchisement puts on you. And no one's been looking at that. That this NDAA legalized the indefinite detention of American citizens. Indefinite detention of American citizens. And yet no one says anything, and it just got upgraded again. It just got brought back in. And they refunded a lot of things. And it looks right past this problem that the United States is funding the very terrorists they say they're trying to take out. That's getting more coverage now. But it's certainly not enough yet. Even the UN agrees that the United States has a say to stop ISIS, when in fact they're the ones that are creating this problem. And I have a very strong suspicion, if not a proof that I can do, that it's all part of the plan, so they're going to do it that way. Russia was involved in that too. That's why I tell you, don't think that any of these countries are out of putting you into some type of a servitude over time. And this new NDAA allows funding now that's under your supposed U.S. taxpayers, so-called. The United States Congress is happy to continue supporting the conflict in Syria by funding so-called moderate rebels who are allegedly fighting against the Syrian President Bashar Assad. I think that they're allegedly moderate rebels that are fighting against Assad as I read that now. All signs indicate the Syrian civil war has become another U.S.-led proxy war against Russia. Well, that's not actually true. The point is, though, they're advocating, see, underneath their representative power that most people who vote for them have said that they have the right to do, they've appropriated money to continue this lie called the moderate rebel, through your tax money, through the tax system of the United States, that then is reflective of you. And this has not stopped. This is continuing. It's been continuing for years. So what they put on the American, they've been putting on, right underneath our noses, Syria, that we're paying for this. They call it a proxy war. I suppose on the United States side it is. On Russia's side, I don't think it is. Russia has actually been asked to be there. They're fighting on the first instance. It might be proxy war with Russia. It didn't start out that way, did it? No, it was a surprise that Russia entered in, causing this whole other set of scenarios to happen since then. You notice France, after Hebdo, they thought they had that. They needed more after Russia stepped into Syria. It fell apart. Section 1225 of the Senate bill titled Matters Relating to Support for the Vetted Syrian Opposition allocates resources for logistics support, including defensive, supportive, fire, intelligence, and medical support. Right in the bill says we, the United States, is paying the mercenaries that are fighting Bashar Assad, that they were all upset that Russia was bombing. While we deny we're doing that, and while Russia is trying to find out why, everyone else lets them deny that they're doing that and are the cause to the very problems Europe is seeing. I don't see this as any more critical than crickets for indefinite detention. Indefinite detention for the American people is the bottom line for me. This just shows how obvious it can get, and the crickets will maintain cricketdom, that we are going to be moving right into the need. And I hear, though I can't find, nobody I know does this, I hear that people in America want it. Stop is. Well, you might as well just go stop the United States. Maybe the is video talking about going after the White House, that maybe ought to happen. But in the practical sense, the United States, the White House is not enough. Washington, D.C. needs to be stopped from lying about its support while it gives support, and the UN, the other nations of the world, lying for the most part about that fact while they say we need to go do all necessary means. All necessary means, in my book, would say, is the United States stopping supporting the people that are fighting Bashar, bring that country back to a peaceful state, oversee that they do if they have to have democratic elections, verify that they have decided they need those elections and let them have it, and we can overview like everybody else does. When the election happens in Africa, someone gives their thumbs up about how good it is. What was wrong with that? That if all means necessary is not condemning that the United States is appropriating money to pay these so-called moderate rebels, the United States proxy mercenaries, is a fascination, if nothing else, to me. It's a sadness, but a fascination nonetheless. I'll just put it that way. So I don't start getting all so broke up I can't do my broadcast over how sad this thing is. That we are in the throes of this in the United States. I told you the mirror of Europe and the mirror of the Middle East reflects on kind of what goes on in the United States. It's more transparent to us. And I can just tell you that because we went crickets on NDAA when they went extrajudicial. They literally destroyed the government right there. There's no judicial branch. They even destroyed the Libra Code. I read it right out of that memo. There is not even an international convention now that they agree to that the Libra Code was the lead authority for, that explain how we can see that we're in martial law. We see that they're in martial law when you see them doing martial law things. By their deed, it says right in Article 1, that the United States has even abandoned that standard because they don't have to now have any judicial department. There's no government that they're working. They're going extrajudicial. That should have terrified people all by itself. It's a rogue group of people. It can't even see it be a rogue state now. They've destroyed the establishment of the government when they took out the need to refer to the judicial branch of government. That we see the effect, transparently we see the little things going on in the United States that reflect what's happening in other places. I'll recall the military helicopters that have been going through towns mimicking shooting. Maybe they're not. Maybe they're actually shooting live ammo. I don't know, but people say it sounds like they're shooting. My imagination says they should be shooting blanks, but who knows? In many towns, Jade Helm, I said that's probably an ongoing operation. They probably did that before they even got there. They understand the South and the East pretty well right now. Things are already been in place. They understand what's going on. And they did it. They got in and got out. No one knows what happened. They did a good job. I think they went home and went high-fiving because they did a successful mission against the people. And we get this report: secret military operations to divert LAX planes for a week. Mysterious maneuvers over the Pacific are forcing the change in Los Angeles International Airport landings at night, meaning noise for thousands of people in the flight path. Like that's the most important problem. What's going on in the Pacific? Part of that was done a few years ago when they said they were going to be doing maneuvers. But why do you interrupt civilian aircraft, which tells you the military has the power right here? Otherwise, the military would have had to come hat in hand to get this whole thing changed around. No, they just did it on a notice. And the civilian side acts in response to a military command. If you don't recognize this stuff, what they're doing, I don't know what to say, but to tell you, you better start paying attention to this. That this is the notices that we're going, it's turning down on you, folks. It's turning down on you. They're doing it so slow, you're never going to need your gun. Forget it. Military can actually change, for a week, change the flight patterns. That's, to me, was pretty interesting. Now, and because I also know being, flying, there's pretty strict rules as well. You have to pay attention. It's not just a free open airspace out there. You really do, and anymore it's even worse. I'm sure I haven't even been in it for a long time, but it started to really get regulated, and you really had to really have to pay attention as they squeeze these aircraft control centers around. That squeezes down the VFR flyers as well. You have to be careful because the corridors get more concentrated. I'm kind of surprised. It's pretty amazing that there's not more accidents at some level. However, that system is fairly vast. That when they get a report from the military maneuver, you think they couldn't go out in the Pacific a little farther so they didn't do that, folks? But no, they did it real close enough to interfere with the traffic at night. mean, they go down to the atolls of the South Pacific to blow off nuclear weapons. What was so important they had to do it right off the coast that they had to change civilian flight patterns? And that's kind of a dangerous thing in a way. It's another commendation to pilots. They really have to pay attention because you get into habits. You really have to work on not getting habits. You get used to flying into airports a certain way. And so it's not it may seem simple on the surface, but the authority that shut down the civil aviation system, at least not shut it down, but changed it for a week, has to be a little bit of a thought in your brain that they're doing it. Why didn't they have an alternative? In other words, when you look at the law says that everywhere the government is to impose, it has to have thought the least amount of imposition. What's the least amount of interference to accomplish what the goal is underneath the power of the government to do so? Like I've said, the TSA has a standard operating procedure that you need to challenge if you're going to go flying. You need to do it before to challenge whether or not what they're doing is the least restrictive that they're regulating you to in order to accomplish their goal. That when you see the military ordering that they're going to do something and they can't do it anywhere else, that I think that standard's gone because they would have been able to do it somewhere else, I'm sure. What country do you live in, folks? You think you live in a free country? If you live in a free country, why do you get all this regulation? Why do you have the military telling you what to do? Why is it outside of your control? Why is your voice being diminished, your capacity being diminished to the point that I'm saying go local? But when you go local, be careful, because the military surveillance system is everywhere. No different than Europe is supposed to put a veneer on the European nations called the European Union that removed the borders, and now they're using those European nations to now put restrictions to travel up in a plan that was supposed to have no restrictions to travel. For what, folks? For purposes of skilled workers. That's what that whole thing was about. Again, the bottom line. Remember how that was really all that started to move, that people in any country could go anywhere in the European Union where they really couldn't do that when Europe, the nations, were available. That they removed the restrictions of travel so people could go to work. You human resources, you. The migration into which now is more human resources, as we see A2030 telling us, is now being checked by more constrained travel, to the point now that even if you're in a hotel, they'll just have the military show up and say you can't go anywhere. Now, I think Grimner was saying in the chat, might as well call it Hotel California. You can arrive, but you'll never leave. This is your states, folks. Now, if we got the veneer of no borders and free transit across the government, across the land in Europe, that now they're locking down. What's to say they can't do the same thing in the states of the United States when you have the veneer of states? Actually, when we, as it came out in the WT chat through a little conversation about going to the CIA World Factbook, and I said, go look. In the United States, they call all your states administrative divisions. The states are, from the federal perspective in the CIA World Factbook, your states are administrative divisions. They're not sovereignties. And so they're already treated as if they're a European Union. And then they'll now sift down through the pseudo-sovereignty and say, oh, your borders are going to be controllable. And they're doing it even worse than that. They have you now down to your roads. It's really already down to community caretaking was the next. It was already in place, but now that's going to be local to everybody. That I keep telling you why you have to go local. Because if you go local now, the DEA is running a massive wiretap program almost entirely through a single California county court. So your DOJ and your justice system is in on it through the Bar Association member and a judge that you vote, those people down there, into place. The DOJ has been instrumental in curbing abuse and misconduct by local law enforcement agencies around the nation. Its own backyard, however, remains a complete mess. This is what we found. We show cause that the federal agencies and employees are not committing felonies or treason. And they sent the FBI on us to tell us that we were the ones that were intimidating the government. I felt pretty good at one level. Pretty powerful to be all by your lonesomes, few of us, intimidating the government, folks. Because we sent them a letter. Says, show cause. Give us a reason why our probable cause-based observations don't say you're a felon. This is beyond, folks. This is now beyond, and you are now the terrorist. But we kind of know that. We knew this. We're not playing without a sense of what's going on. We certainly don't know it all. But it didn't stop us from engaging it, folks, and we're still having to engage it. A lot kind of going on. But the FBI and DA have been obstructing investigations by the DOJ's Inspector General for several years now. The DOJ only just recently got around to addressing the widespread warrantless use of stingray devices by both of these agencies. This is where they get up on your telephone calls from your digital data that you send everywhere, and these receptive systems pick up your digital signal, and they record everything that goes through. The DEA agents are hooking up with prostitutes and sex parties while on the clock and receiving bonuses rather than in suspensions or pink slips. The United States Marshal Service has been acting as a law unto itself, confiscating cell site simulator records to keep them out of the hands of the FOIA requesters, flying on its own airborne cell to tower spoofers and blowing assets forfeiture funds on $10,000 conferences for $10 conference room tables. The chain of command from the DEA runs up to the DOJ, not vice versa, and as would be suggested from the paragraph, federal drug agents have built a massive wiretapping operation in Los Angeles suburbs, secretly intercepting tens of thousands of Americans' phone calls and text messages to monitor drug traffickers across the United States, despite objections from the Justice Department lawyers who fear the practice may not be legal. They're the ones supposed to know, folks. So they prosecute you on something they may think is illegal? This is the government that's supposed to be the executive branch. If you thought you still have a government. There's no judicial system now because the same DOJ will prosecute you extrajudicially. And no one will know about it, is the other point. The DEA apparently isn't too concerned. Its parent agency's own lawyers find the action potentially illegal. See, there's lawlessness in the land. So your phone, the local court is used in order to judge, in particular, has been used to be able to do this and get whatever warrants they thought they were getting. The massive amount of surveillance stemming almost entirely from a single judge and his presumably overactive writs is problematic. More so are the numerous explanations offered up by officers for this gaping surveillance portal through Judge Helios Hernandez. Hernandez's enthusiasm for issuing a writ wiretap warrants to the DEA may have something to do with his attorney as narcotics prosecutor. But for the record, he's offering the following justification for his actions. Hernandez declined to comment through a spokesman. So, local shows you how, when I say local can go local, folks. He's showing you right there, those judges, local judges, they're really bar members, they're not really judges. They're part of the system. This one's pretty enthusiastic. How, if you don't control local, then the feds come in. And why we were talking before that the sheriff is really important to understand where the lawful authority for the sheriff is and being able to tap that and make sure that there's a fiduciary breach discussion if they're not. So, local, I just found this, not just that the judge is happy to write these warrants, it means here's the point is, there's no judicial barrier at all, period. And there should be, and it is a local control that protects you. Because if these judges were doing the law, and doing it accurately and rightfully, and being really, being the shield of law, there would be a whole lot more work to this. And I don't think you could be the judge that was the single most judges that having, I guess Arnold Schwarzenegger wrist or something here to sign these warrants. that you see the local control is very important here, that the feds have to come local, and they're getting concurrence that if you keep putting these people into office or you don't make judicial complaints about their professionalism and ethics, they might have a no comment, but the bottom line is that they don't like having complaints put in their record. All y'all that might be in California around this guy, you need to start saying, hey, here's the report. You need to track it down. Go to the blogcaster, get the link, go do your own investigation. Get enough facts to make a cogent statement, a complaint that you may not go anywhere, but you have it in the record. And you keep persisting. Maybe there's other things you can do. Maybe if you're a victim of this, you can find out. Find out if you've been a victim of this. He doesn't have the right to do that to you. That gets him out of his judicialship. If you want to pursue that guy, then the obvious one is stop voting for the guy. Send the message. Why? It's local, folks. The dominoes fell. It comes down, and now you're seeing the interaction of the surveillance system in your life already into America, all based on this thought about, this idea that there's a war of terror. A war on terror. It's a war of terror. The war on terror. It's a war of terror. And they keep the meme out. And I'm really critical of this. I can't believe so many people are so absent of this. This anonymous group using this mask that promotes a Jesuit fiction movie of something, the history that never did happen. Actually showing some incompetence in the guy, in historic incompetence of the guy who it emulates as a brand. Hacktivists claim is planning attacks in Paris, the United States, and other worldwide locations for Sunday. Almost seemed like part of the script, didn't it? Now we'll have this anonymous group promoting the banner of justice to come out and tell everybody's going to be attacked. There it is. The dominoes are falling, going global, folks. The message is out. People be afraid. Hacktivists associated with the anonymous collective claim they have uncovered Islamic State is plans for Sunday's attacks in Paris, as well as the United States, Italy, Indonesia, and Lebanon. The report was published online on Saturday, confirming Anonymous has allegedly identified 3 at-risk events in Paris, including a demonstration by a collective du droit de femmes, a women's rights group, concerts in Segles Electronics with Vocodex and RE Play and Rotower, and an event called Concrete Invites Drum Code featuring Adam Bayer, Alan Fitzpatrick, and Joel Mull. It went on and on and on here. They now responded. There's going to be one even attack in Atlanta. So here you have the anonymous group coming in. They somehow find, I didn't see any information, I couldn't find it, that this is going on. This is just another broadcast platform for these people to get the message out that you should be very afraid. And in light of this, people are. They're not responding. In wake, again, another domino. I'd say, well, we know that they're coming out to try and beat you down, take your guns. And part of it, not that this is a gun issue, but they know. I told you one of the problems last week was they really can't come at us in America this way because they don't know where 1 in 10, 1 in or 15 may have a concealed weapon that they are proficient at that can interfere with a plan like this. So they only attack places that are going to be able to hit and run. And you notice when they did the malls, there was always someone around to shoot back. That in America, you just can't do it quite the same as they can do it in a place where they know everybody's unarmed. That right after the France thing, in the wake of terrorist attacks on disarmed France, U.S. Police Department, the U.S. Police Department asks citizens to disarm. Just hours after 155 people were slaughtered by gun-wielding terrorists in France, residents of Greensboro, North Carolina, were asked by the city's police to show their commitment to safety. To show their commitment to safety by turning in as many guns as they want. So, again, the point is that it doesn't matter what happened, is that the government sits there to do this nonsense. And people, I'm sure, will listen. And the reason is for safety. And so if you haven't done it, then you're impliedly at least unsafe, aren't you? And so the meme gets happening. They put this seed in people's minds that it's unsafe to have the guns. It's unsafe to be protected. It's unsafe unless we're here to help you. Remember, knock, knock, knock. We're from the government. We're here to help you. Well, probably help you out of your stuff. How about help you out of your life, like this one? Cops kick in the door. Now we're going to go on something. I'm going to talk about the cops in this country, United States of America. Now, a whole bunch of stories popped up. I said, okay, I put them on my tabs a few weeks ago. This is now the news. This is what I predicted a long time ago. I said, folks, the way this is coming down is the cops, I don't know how long ago I said this, the cops are having, well, we can see it in the reports, that the cops are having carte blanche license to kill you. At the time, it was sounding a little pretty out there even then, even though we had the reports. That I said there's a time coming when the cops will be given license and there will be no thought in their brain that they can't kill you. This is partly why I was saying you need to go down and you need to go to the cops locally and you need to look at their policies for interacting with people and you need to write policies. You need to be persistent and on them about writing policies that maintain respect and protections despite their training. You need to look and see and think about the dynamic that goes on with these policies that they are trained to follow, that they use as their shield of protection when they hurt you. Because we're in the day now, folks. A whole bunch of news stories, on and on. I told you they picked from the cops. They picked them. The Supreme Court has said you can be too smart to be a cop, and you can be too psychologically stable. That's not my opinion. That's what the court says. That we're now we're seeing the fruits of this type of logic, if you can, the law, legalisms. Cop kicks in door and kills the wrong man. We're going to hear a whole bunch of these stories all coming out now recently. Also in North Carolina, an unarmed North Carolina man was shot to death this weekend by sheriff's deputies in Harnett County. Sheriff's deputies, that's your local law enforcement, folks. If you don't have this with your local law, they will come and kill you. And they don't care. And it's because they're not interacting with them and I don't mean like Ferguson, I don't mean like getting in their face. I mean coming in on their business hours and working with them on their business hours and work out what they got going. You find their policy for interacting with the public and you go line by line and you figure out, put it in practice and work out how it's insufficient and make changes to it. And when they don't, you may have to sue them to make changes to it. Because you have standing because that's relating to you. That's like going after a TSA standard operating procedure condition. You're having to do this now because there's no other barrier. An unarmed North Carolina man was shot to death on this weekend by sheriff's deputies in Harnett County who reportedly kicked in his door after misidentifying his home as that of a suspect in another crime. John Livingston, 33, was shot several times during the incident. Few answers are forthcoming on the circumstances. Now, unless you've got even if you have a gun in that capacity, you may not survive that either. And if you do survive and you do kill someone, you're going to be on the hook. Why? Because you're an enemy combatant. This is not just news. NDAA just perfected this. What NDAA did is that it showed that there's going to be extrajudicial treatment of people. No justice. I won't go through there's a whole lot of stuff here. Things you have to now, the war is here. Battlefield America is through the cops. It's not through the military in America. And they're going to come after you one by one, whether you're the intended victim or you're made the victim of this insanity. Wife, so now you think about yourself, I'm tough and big and bad, and okay, so they kill me, they don't. Well, folks, your family gets interfered with, obviously. Another report, wife has heart attack after police murder her husband. The ripple effect of this harm in society will be ceaseless. A disturbing account of what happened to a cattle rancher in Idaho is emerging after police officers showed up and shot him in the chest. By all accounts, Jack and Donna Yantis are pillars of the community. They are now suffering an unimaginable loss after a car collided with one of their bulls. This article below in the video, you can see the broadcaster from the Tri-City Herald, the family of an Adams County rancher involved in the encounter with two sheriff's deputies, says that the deputies killed him, a completely unjustifiable shooting. Now that's your position. See, they're justified because they feared for their life. And they'll set up all the plans they'll make all the testimony to prove that they should have feared for their life, even though that you're an innocent rancher needing to deal with your bull who just got hit by a car and it's out on the street and not in too happy a mood. The idiot cops of which don't know how to handle a raging bull who now has been run down by a car and still running around, not happy bull, and so instead of calling the rancher, they try to shoot the bull, and they are, cops. They don't know how to shoot the bull. And so he gets more pissed off until he falls in the street. And the rancher's coming, and here's the problem. He's going to get his rifle so he can put the animal out of its misery. Apparently the really super intelligent cops, actually that's what the Supreme Court says, is people too smart to be not smart enough, they can be too smart and they can still be a cop. Too psychologically unstable, they can be a cop. They decide because the rancher's coming down to put mercy on the bull, to take the bull out of his misery, to put a bullet in his head. They feared for their life and they shot the rancher. The bull suffered until it bled to death. The rancher dies at the scene. The wife has a heart attack. This is your future, folks. You can have an effect on the standards by which your state certification raises the level for people to be cops. You bring these examples forward. You say, listen, I don't want to have this to happen to me. I have standing to argue this is not good enough. Hopefully you get a whole bunch of people do the same thing, and you hit them from all sides. Video shows cop attack on non-violent 13-year-old in school lobby as his mom watched. Like, what is she going to do anyway? Charged with a felony child abuse and battery. Another school resource officer has been caught on surveillance video aggressively using excessive force against a student. Although the teen never made a violent or threatening gesture towards the officers, the recently released video clearly shows the cop assaulting the student before throwing him on the ground and nearly breaking his wrist. It's on and on, folks. There's a story. The mother's just, we can't hear the video, but she's certainly concerned. Can't really do much about it. Cop's in his face, dealing with a 13-year-old who yelled at his mom. This cop is really a psychologically unstable uniformed officer with a gun in charge of taking care of your sons and daughters. So, two things here. You need to find out what the policies are of the cop officers that are looking over your sons and daughters, or I would think more importantly, and because there's just so much evidence against it, get your sons and daughters out of school. Because this charging of the officer could have been actually murder. And then he gets to go through the real the strainer, which is not so just the size of a cop, to let all cops through against the most heinous and obvious of acts, which defines for you live under martial law, and there's no military officer there that you see. You think you see a cop. You don't realize that is the military officer. That you have to, one option here is you avoid these people because your life literally depends on it. So we have what apparently is a charge. We don't see the accountability. My problem here, and your problem should be, what's the mentality in the cops hired and the policy of the cops hired that they think they can stuff their finger in your face, assault you in the first instance, and you have to stand there, and then they're already there being that vile people, that they then attack you. And you have no way to remedy that. Where is the check and balance on your right to defend yourself? Where's the clear, bright line, not the fuzzy one the bar association's made, the non-existent judicial system advancing the military cause now, because it's non-judicial, folks. They're just a voice for how the system's going to do you. And literally do you. And in any manner, these psychopaths figure they can get away with it. And even where they don't even care. Why? Because the system allows protection. Why? Because the juries are protecting these people. Officer shoots unarmed man while he is face down on the ground. This used to be, we used to hear thoughts about this. We used to hear events of this over years. I told you my whole reason for researching law was based on an event 30 some odd years ago where 5 cops decide on a trumped-up traffic violation, which I proved later never happened, but they were able to confront me, and I can't tell you today, literally a credit card thickness somehow changed the moment. I remember the moment to this day, but I don't know how I'm here to tell you about it. This is the kind of nutso situation started a long time ago that nobody noticed. That if we don't get in the game, you could be an innocent victim against this type of psychopathy that's agreed to be a force and effect in your life. Cops arrested after showing her shoot an unarmed man. My problem with this is, so okay, we got the arrest of the officer in the first point. Fine, they made charges, but the man's dead. What's his rights? See, his rights were taken under the color of the authority of the one who claimed that she feared for her life. And I found it interesting on this one thing. We see the video where she shoots him, how he shoots him. I don't see any real justification here, but they do, apparently. But then I found another link to another picture, and the pictures are different than the video. The still picture of someone who got shot in the snow is different than the location of the video. And that caused me some trouble. I don't have the time to go back and research the validity of all this. Why the 2 different locations? What was this video? If it was the truth, what's the other picture? If it's not the truth, how is it being used to exonerate this? Is this just another play? It was just a play acting to see to show you what might have happened. Because later, this officer who did this got charged. She gets acquitted for shooting a guy in the back, face down in the snow. Well, okay, so he had his head up and he's had his hands out, kind of underneath him, but not really that bad. And he's saying, he's not doing anything. He's just laying down, got his hands up, shaking them back and forth, like, what do you want? What do you want? Stop, that kind of stuff. So she gets charged, and then she walks. And the video that comes out is different than the still picture that happened months and months and months and months before when she got arrested, in the first reports of it. And then another report came out this week as the dominoes are laying out for us in America to show you what's been happening. I told you that there has to have been, inside the system, there has to have been a discussion with the cops. The training is that you will be protected. If you have a plausible reason, you will be protected. Even that plausible reason may be being lifted. United States Supreme Court expands immunity for killer cops. This is the title. The titles of the websites, that can be made up anyway. You have to go read the story. But this is the gist of the whole point. I was telling you a long time ago, I want to remind you here, I was telling you the time's coming, folks. These cops are going to be the execution squads. They're going to be given a license to do whatever they want. And here apparently is the first types of rulings from supposed high places. These are actually the depths of the stinking abyss, coming to protect the military that's been occupying your lands all this time and not making an excuse about it now. With the death toll from police brutality continued to mount, the U.S. Supreme Court on Monday issued a decision expanding authoritarian doctrine of qualified immunity, which shields police officers from legal accountability. If someone shooting you in the back is not enough for a jury to find guilt, I don't even know why they needed this case, but even the qualified immunity becomes even thicker now. Bigger shield for these people. When a civil rights case is summarily dismissed by a judge on the grounds of qualified immunity, the case is legally terminated. It never goes to trial before a jury, and it never decided on its constitutional merits, which at some point you would understand. But the point is that the qualified immunity is what kills that case. And the Supreme Court in Luna Molinix says that they're not going to allow the prosecution where Leju's family members, remember, the one who got killed is not there to defend or get his rights or her rights. The family members have to do it. Where is our protection in the first instance? Over the military's claim that you attacked it and giving carte blanche license to be able to shoot you when they just say the magic words. That you didn't stop and say, wait a minute, that's not fulfilling the Constitution. And then thinking about the condition that must mean you live in when the Constitution is being overridden and ignored. The family members claimed that Mullenix used excessive force in violation of Fourth Amendment, part of the Bill of Rights. The district court that originally heard the case, together with the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, denied immunity to Mullenix on the grounds that his conduct violated clearly established law. The Supreme Court intervened to uphold that Mullenix was entitled to immunity, a decision that will set a precedent for the summary dismissal of civil lawsuits against police brutality around the country. This is the Supreme Court's response to the ongoing wave of police mayhem and murder. The message is clear. The killing will continue. Do not question the police. If you disobey the police, you will forfeit your life. And if you've ever been on the receiving end of this, there's not much way that you cannot not disobey. They always tell you to do two inconsistent things. Two inconsistent actions. Stand up, lay down. Put your hands up, put your hands down. Get in the car, get out. Don't look at me, look at me. Talk to me, don't talk to me. Stand over here, don't stand over here. Get your hands up, put your, not your hand. You can't put your hands anywhere. I mean, it's just, your arms, it means you're armed, folks. Your hands are on your arms, so you're already armed, even if you don't carry a weapon. You might as well just carry one, jeez. No, that wasn't advice. If you have one, you'll probably be shot dead. Unless you know how to quick draw, and then you'll be shot dead anyway. Because there's more of them. So, if you disobey the police, it's impossible to obey the police when they're psychologically unstable. And they're trained to amplify this. So, it's the writing's on the wall, folks. As I was telling you before, long time ago, it's coming. That day is now here. There is no immunity against the military. Well, the only thing I can see we have left is either, the outright overthrow, which is not going to happen. We got juries giving up the acquittal of these people doing wrong. Then we're not going to be able to do it with the people. That each one of us has to now set out to try and do the policies that will give the guidelines, that will at least give the first moment of thought that maybe they don't kill people first. See, and then you get to use that. When you're confronted and you have the rule, you can cite that rule. And that's enough. I found that that's sometimes enough to slow up things. Because here we have the qualified immunity, and then this next story came up. The San Diego cops keep forgetting to turn on their body cameras. Now, what does it matter, folks, if they really can expand qualified immunity to include almost all things? Giving the military death squads complete license to just take you out and let your family deal with it. How's that? Where does it say that in any of the constitutions? And when you find that it doesn't say that in any of the constitutions, I'm going to propose something. You don't live under the constitutions. How's that? The nearest I could find that showed what we lived under was when you read the Lieber Code. And it says, you know the martial law is on you when you see the martial law is on you. You know them by what they do to you. You know them indeed. At some point, we're going to have to come to terms with the truth of this. Whether or not it's the Lieber Code working, it's not. I mean, they went extrajudicial, so it's not even working. I'm telling you that's the guideline that you use. Until we come to terms with the guidelines and understand what's at play here and speak out against, act against it, the future is pretty well on the ropes for most of what we do. I want to read this story. I mean, it's on and on. These cops are nuts. I mean, absolutely nuts. They're getting the only place I can see that they have the ability to do what they're doing without actual accountability is under martial law. Just what they did in Belgium now with the military. They made it obvious, and they took the military to a hotel and they locked it all down. Hotel California, as Grimner said. And we saw more about this problem with forfeiture. That's been coming up when they can come and steal your stuff and use an excuse to keep it, even though you're not a criminal. And the Constitution says otherwise, you know you don't live in a constitutional Republican form of representative government. Where'd it go? Well, it was a republic if you could keep it, folks. We were told, we were warned a long time ago. Cops now stealing your stuff to protect you from people who might steal your stuff. In a ridiculous move ostensibly designed to protect citizens from theft, the New Haven Police Department has begun stealing things from innocent individuals Yes, you read that correctly. The New Haven Police Department announced its plans this week to start stealing things from unsuspecting residents who leave their doors unlocked. If you are missing, what is that about your house? I guess one day you go away and come back and the movers have taken all your stuff. Just because he looked in on his community caretaking and saw no one home and opened the door. Oh, it was unlocked. But here's your car. Door's unlocked. If you are missing your valuables, it may have been not taken by a private thief. It may have been stolen by the public thief. According to Lieutenant Herbert Sharp of the NHPD, police are now taking private property from unlocked cars and bringing it to the station. This, of course, is done to quote, deter theft. Sharp assures the public that when his officers are opening the door to your property and removing your belongings with no search warrant and no probable cause, this is 100% legal. Quote, it's called a caretaker, says Sharp. What did I say earlier about community caretaking? We've heard periodic stories. Why I talk about it. I just don't talk about these things because they're just interesting. No, they mean something, these stories I find, to tell you the evidence of the encroachment, the evidence of your ability to react, and your time to react. It's all here. It's called caretaking. They're taking care of you. Like I said, when they find your front door open, caretaking. I'll just move all your stuff out. Just call the mover. We'll move all your stuff out and stick it in a warehouse. Because you weren't home and you left your door unlocked. Well, they've already been doing this to your child as well. When they make the decision, you haven't quite kept the little one quite so up to their standard, one that you can't meet that standard. I know because when I was doing my documentary, I had many women who've had their so-called child taken, their son or daughter taken, and when they went in to try and do what the state said, they could not comply with all the requirements that are put on them. That's why it came to the conclusion, run, folks. You have to avoid these people until we can set up some protections at least, and that's just paper, you know. American cops now steal more property than U.S. burglars combined. For decades now, the federal government and their cohorts of law enforcement have been carrying out theft of citizenry on a massive scale. We're not talking about taxes, but an insidious power known as civil asset forfeiture. You know, under e-Libra code, they get to steal your stuff if they can use it to protect them and their security and advance what they need to do as the military. It says it right in the Libra code. When you know that you're in martial law, when indeed you see that they're under martial law. The civil asset forfeiture is also under admiralty. That's supposed to be only regulated by the federal government judiciary. The states do not have authority because in the Constitution it says admiralty jurisdiction is in the federal government's judiciary. So if they're doing admiralty forfeiture under state law, that's a federal district. Maybe that's one of those administrative divisions that the CIA was talking about. You think, folks? Now, I want to ask you again. When you look out in the world and it's not quite the way they told you the Constitution was written, do you still operate under the Constitution? And if not, what do you operate under? The police are stealing more than the burglars now. According to the United States Department of Justice, the value of asset forfeiture recoveries from United States authorities from 1989 to 2010 was $12 billion here, increasing an average of 19% per year. If I read that number really quickly, I think it's 12 billion. The police are stealing more than the burglars. And apparently we're going to get a little bit more in New Hampshire. They're going to steal it even because you didn't keep your door locked. Because they're caretaking. Well, apparently it's not your stuff. That's another point. Folks, start looking at this. We have things to respond to. This is not a joke. You're the guy who got his door kicked in. You could be your next door. You could be driving down the road and you just some psychopath that didn't get his enough coffee that day. Get his steroid injection or something, whatever the heck his excuse is. Didn't like what happened to his wife. Had an argument, if he has a wife. But these cops couldn't care less about breaking the law on video. Tell the victim it's policy. So we tell them, I don't know about your policy. I want to know about your duty. But your policy. What did I tell you? You need to walk into your standard operating procedure policy, and you need to start imparting your view that maybe there's something that's not right there and sue to get it corrected, because they go on policy. And they're not bashful to tell you that. Even on video now, how far this has gone so quickly. The cops don't care. So that should, they pull you over for a traffic stop. It's going to be fun here when Google finally gets their cars on the road. When cop pulls over the Google self-driving car and finds no driver to ticket. Isn't that fun? These guys are so intelligent, they stopped a car without an actual driver, these cops. These people that are too smart to be a cop, and that's okay, too psychologically stable, and that's okay to be a cop. The Supreme Court has allowed these people to ride around on motorcycles, and this guy was so smart he stopped a Google self-driving car. Why? Because the car was operating at a speed safe within the zone, but not fast enough for his liking. I think it was operating like 25 and a 34 or so, 35. So he pulled it over. He pulls over a car without a driver. Well, now he's got a passenger. The passenger's sitting over there talking to the cop. Isn't that a fun little thing? I want one, folks. This is how smart the cops are that you're dealing with. But they're also sending a message here. You're going to be in a car that's going to drive, and the cops are going to have to deal with that. You might be the next victim, because I'm finding out, like in California, if you don't have ownership in the vehicle, you don't have any rights either. Cop kills himself to cover up his crime, staged it to make it look like a war on cops. It's something I was going to talk about here a couple of weeks ago. I think it's just making the news now to show you how psychologically stable and conniving these cops are. He'd kill himself over to try and make a point about the war on cops and be part of it and be on the take on the other side. In September, a massive manhunt ensued. Lieutenant Joe Glinowicz was found dead 50 yards from his cruiser 15 minutes after he radioed in that he was pursuing 3 suspects on foot. Despite locking down the entire town, no suspects were found in the area. On Wednesday, it was revealed that the reason no suspects were ever found was due to the fact that Glinowicz killed himself. In a press conference Wednesday morning, the County Major Crimes Task Force Commander Flinko says this staged suicide was the end result of an extensive criminal acts that Glinowicz had been committing. So the cops are the criminals inside the system, and here this guy has been caught. And so he figured out an elaborate scheme. He's not so non-conniving to figure this one out. And luckily he gets caught. He gets found out, but he's dead. But this is the mentality you're dealing with that's a cop. We're not all like that. Well, I don't know. You're not stopping it either. This guy had to deal with this for quite a long time. And we know this is in the system because 330,000 cops threatened surprise for Quentin Tarantino to promise to hurt him when he came out, and I think his statement was taken out of context when he said that murdering cops should be dealt with like murderers. And 300,000 member union are going to hurt him. This is what we have to look forward in these court cases where the Supreme Court has just given a bigger bolstering, a bigger right to the qualified immunity. So thank you for tuning in today. I hope some of that was available. I don't want it to be too frightening and paranoia sounding, but this is the reality. We're in battlefield America where the cops or the military are the occupiers. If you can, please donate to reallibertymedia.com. The servers and Grimner's website allows me to have the broadcaster and all the files, and then worldtruth.org, social network. That's where our servers are being paid for, if you can donate to those. And then you have Jules over at ucy.tv, all her time and ability. And then you have the AM and FM broadcasters that simulcast this. If you can find other websites or broadcasters to simulcast it, let them know. Drop them a line and tell them to carry the broadcast, and we'll continue. MarkOnTheBeast.com is how you get a hold of me for any contributions of information and questions. And take care.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
So that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.